Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice was appointed National Security Advisor by President George W. Bush in 2001. 4 years later, she became the first female African-American Secretary of State. While in office, she championed an initiative called Transformational Diplomacy. It was intended to expand and strengthen democratic institutions worldwide.
Rice drew from personal experiences in her new book, Democracy Stories from the Long Road to Freedom. It examines how democracies are fostered and sometimes fail. She writes, there is no more thrilling moment than when people finally seize their rights and their liberty. That moment is necessary, right, and inevitable. It is also terrifying and disruptive and chaotic. And what follows it is hard, really, really hard. Condoleezza Rice joins us now at this table. Good morning.
Good morning.
I remember a speech you made in Cairo, in which you basically said, for 60 years, my country, the United States, pursued stability at the expense of democracy in this region, here in the Middle East, and we achieved neither. Now we're taking a different course. We're supporting the democratic aspirations of all people.
Yes. It's important to do so.
So how are we doing? You're telling us stories now.
Yes. Well, as is with anything that's worth doing, it's hard, and the jury's out for a very long time. But we've seen some successes, and we've seen some reverses. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this book is to challenge those who keep saying that democracy is in recession or democracy is going backwards, to remember that this is a very long road, and there will be setbacks. But for every Turkey with Erdogan or every Egypt where the Arab Spring has given way to a military coup, you have a Colombia which has rescued itself from a failed state in the early 2000s with American help. You have a Kenya that, despite contested elections, continues along a more or less democratic path. And I wanted to remind people also that our own history is one of a very, very long road to freedom. An American Constitution where my ancestors were once counted as 3/5 of a man, where my father couldn't vote reliably in 1952 in Birmingham, Alabama. And now we've had a black president. I've been Secretary of State. Colin Powell has been Secretary of State. We sometimes lose sight of the big picture.
You call slavery America's birth defect, which I think is a very poetic way to describe it. I've never heard it described that way.
Well, a birth defect is something that is always with you, but it's always also something that you can overcome. I think in this case, we see that this birth defect of slavery colors the way that we look at each other. We are not a colorblind society. We probably never will be. Sometimes it causes us to look at each other with suspicion, and that's at the root of any number of problems, including issues of policing that we've been concerned with. And so I like to describe it in that way, but I like to remind people that every day we get up and we try to make this imperfect democracy a little bit better. We try to include more people in We the People, and that's America's story.
Let me ask you, in this book, though, you write, Americans seem to be experiencing a kind of crisis of confidence about our own democracy, who we are and what we value.
Yeah.
That's true under President Trump?
Well, it's been true for some time. We've seen these polls for a long time that Americans are losing confidence in the institutions and that no institution in America today is really fully trusted. And since, as I write in this book, democracy is always at that knife's edge between chaos and authoritarianism. Democracy is the sweet spot where we channel our concerns, our wants, our desires through institutions.
If you're in favor of democracy, what do you as a nation do for the aspirations of people in other countries? That's the question.
Yes.
And it raises questions of sovereignty and other issues.
Well, sovereignty should never be a defense for tyranny and for mistreating your people. I think, first of all, you pay attention to us here. I'm a big believer that America has to be strong at home. Americans have to feel confident. But we have learned, I think, the hard way, that when we don't champion the rights of people, bad things happen. So no one is unhappy these days that Germany and Japan, once states that challenged their neighbors, that were violent in their regions, are now democracies and are pillars of the international system.
But people are unhappy about Egypt, for example.
Yes, but Egypt, under Mubarak, one of the things we want to do, Charlie, is we want to make sure that when we have friends and allies, of course we're going to have to talk to the Egyptian president. But just think, had Mubarak reformed, maybe there wouldn't have been a revolution.
Condi, you write in your book about meeting Vladimir Putin for the first time. You even say that you felt sorry for him.
Well, I felt bad because I met him in 1992. He was deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. He was standing at this very fancy party, and he was there in a kind of Soviet-era suit.
All alone in a corner.
All alone,
Yeah,
kind of in a corner.
You described him as a pale, short man.
Well, he was pale and short, but boy, does he have piercing eyes, I will tell you that.
And now you see him as what? Is there any doubt in your mind about the role that Vladimir Putin has played in our country?
I see him as an authoritarian with an assertive and aggressive foreign policy. I see him as somebody who is engaged in trying to subvert democracy in a number of countries. And I do see him as someone who undoubtedly interfered in our election. But he's an eye for an eye kind of guy. In 2012, we said his election was fraudulent. He's trying to say to us, let me show you that yours can be too. And we have to be careful. We should investigate. I'm furious at the Russians for what they've done. But let's not give him the satisfaction of thinking that he has caused Americans to doubt the legitimacy of our own democratic processes. That would help him to win.
Condoleezza Rice, thank you.
Thank you.
And her book, Democracy: Stories from the Long Road to Freedom, goes on sale tomorrow.